All right. Hello, everybody. I've got some people in the waiting room. We'll give them another minute to come on in. All right. So you can have your cameras on or off for this. At the end, when we do a tasting, I will certainly encourage you to turn your cameras on, but I won't force you. Not a bad craft. So we might have a few more people come in, but I will get started with a little introduction while people keep coming in. So, welcome to our Tuesday webinar series. Let me turn that ding dong down. Um, I'm taking over this month from Elliot to do something a little more fun. With Valentine's Day coming up this weekend, I don't know about you guys, but I expect chocolate. So, we wanted to share some chocolate love with all of you. I think you all know me here. I'm Ellen Weisberg. I'm the Director of Operations here at the Investors Center, but I also got a degree at Le Cordon Bleu College of Culinary Arts. And I've been a lifelong chocolate enthusiast, so I feel very confident I am qualified tonight to give you a little history lesson on how we've come to know chocolate as we consume it today. Go over some health and wellness facts and why you should be eating chocolate. And then we will end it with an interactive tasting. We'll talk about how to taste chocolate and give you a little more information on how to read the labels and pick out chocolate. Um, so hopefully you all got your sample kit in the mail. And we'll be using that at the end. Definitely say grab a palate cleanser, maybe a glass of wine or coffee. I've got water tonight, so I'm on the clock. Um, but you'll want something for in between those bites. So to get started in a minute here, got a few more people coming in. I'm going to share my screen during our history lesson, and then I'll be back here in my chocolate factory for our tasting. So let's get this screen going. All right. All right. So welcome everybody again to Chocolate Unwrapped, Origins, Wellness, and an Interactive Tasting. So we are just going to dive right into chocolate from the very beginning. So chocolate, the cacao plant, has been around since about 2000 BC. Um, Historians think that it was probably domesticated, though, around 1500 BC. So chocolate has been around really for a very long time. Um, we'll get more into it in the health section, but you often hear the terms cacao and cocoa and chocolate all used interchangeably. Essentially, cacao is the plant, it's the raw, unroasted version of the bean, and cocoa is what you get when you roast the bean, and chocolate is sort of the final product and the flavor of it. So I'm going to use the term chocolate mostly this evening just to keep it simple and not confusing. But again, once we get to the health and wellness section, we'll go into a little deeper dive about the difference between those terms. So the first evidence we have of chocolate being really consumed is around the year 300 with the Mayans. In their culture, there's lots of texts that refer to it as God's food, and there's lots of temple wall carvings depicting both the plant and the drink. So the Mayans consumed chocolate as a beverage. They would grind it up, serve it as a hot beverage, and add spices to it because they did not have sugar in the Americas at this point. It was a very bitter drink. Um, but people who drank it were noticeably healthier. And that is why they thought it was a gift from the gods. People who drank this had better nutrition because chocolate is, as we'll go into further detail later, very nutritious. So they used it as a ceremonial drink and as a health elixir. Um, and they didn't know, exactly why it made you healthy, but they knew it made you healthy. So it was just one of the most valuable things they had. They also used it as currency in sort of a bartering system. So fast forward to the 13th century, the Aztecs, they still have chocolate. They used it in a very similar fashion as the Mayans. They used it as a health elixir. They believed that one of their gods, whose name I will not butcher tonight, had stolen the plant from paradise and brought it down to the earth. Um, and they also used it as currency, a little more in the style of how we use currency now. They had like set prices. They would use, so many, 4 cocoa beans for a rabbit, 100 cocoa beans for a slave, stuff like that. So in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and he shows up in the Americas and he runs into chocolate because they're using it as currency. And he doesn't really think anything of it. He's like, oh, they're using beans as currency. Like, we have gold, whatever. He sends it back to Spain and they don't really know what to do with it. They're like, what are these like weird looking almonds? And they just pretty much disregard it. But then a few years later, Cortez comes along and he sees the potential in chocolate. He sees them using it as currency. He sees them using it as a health elixir. He sees the value in that it's working. So he's an opportunist and he establishes a plantation, one of the first cocoa plantations, so that he can quite literally grow money on trees. And then he sends it back to Spain, but he sends it back with directions on how to use it. So the Spanish start drinking cocoa as well as a health elixir. It becomes something for the rich and royalty. It was essentially like one of the best multivitamins of the time. And the Spanish, throughout their conquests, also had sugar. They had sugarcane. So they figured out pretty quickly to sweeten the chocolate and created basically the original hot cocoa, hot chocolate. So that's what the Spanish were drinking back then. And people loved it. It was making them healthier. Even that extra sugar, nutrition wasn't that great back then. The extra calories certainly didn't hurt. So now we have this amazing health elixir in Europe. And for the next 200 years, it just spreads all throughout Europe and eventually back to the Americas. So we go back to America. Now we're up to 1765. We're in pre-Revolutionary War America. The first chocolate factory is open here up in Massachusetts called the Walker Baker and Company. So that might sound a little familiar to you if any of you are bakers. When you go down to the baking aisle and you get your unsweetened bar of Baker's chocolate, that is the same Walter Baker and Company chocolate from 1765. This is the same chocolate that George Washington was consuming. This company is now owned by Kraft, but not much has changed. So since from then, chocolate remained pretty much unchanged for about 100 years. It was still just sold as those bitter blocks of chocolate or just the straight up cocoa beans. It was still being consumed as a drink. People were starting to figure out how to add it into baked goods and confections, but we really didn't get to consumable chocolate until 1847. Go back to Britain. J.S. Fry and Sons developed the first chocolate bar for eating. They figured out how to add sugar to it and temper it so that it had a nice snap, it was shelf stable, it would travel, it was easy to consume, and it was obviously a huge hit. But this is still just a dark chocolate bar. We haven't gotten to adding anything to it. We just have a nice, sweet eating chocolate. So people are now trying to innovate with this new eating chocolate. And not too long later, in 1875, the Swiss, along with Henri Nestle, they invent milk chocolate. They had been working on it for a little while, but they were having a hard time creating a shelf-stable product with dairy in it. They're making like fudge and truffles, but those spoil. But Mr. Nestle had just invented his milk flour for infant formula. And they figured out that a powdered milk in the chocolate would make it shelf stable. So now we have shelf stable milk chocolate. It's delicious. It's amazing. It can travel. It can be stored. And we enter an absolute chocolate boom. Everyone's opened up chocolate factories all over the world in rapid succession. So in 1894, Hershey is founded in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In 1911, Mars is founded on the West Coast in Tacoma, Washington. 1919, J.S. Fry and Sons, who made that first chocolate bar, they merged with Cadbury. And then in 1926, Godiva is founded in Belgium. And the Belgians took their chocolate very seriously. They were the first to have a royal chocolatier in court. So them, along with the French, really got into the fancy chocolates and making them bougie, and they started the designer chocolates. So chocolate it's a hit now. Capitalism is taken over, it's going crazy. And by 1937, the US Army actually designated chocolate as a military ration. They contracted Mr. Hershey to develop a high heat resistant bar as a high calorie, emergency, morale boosting, and energy providing pocket sized ration, which I hear did not taste very good, but it got the job done. So now chocolate is mandatory in our diets. The US Army is mandating this as a ration. So the whole 20th century is all about food innovation and testing the limits and making every candy conceivable. I think we're all really probably familiar with chocolate's journey during the 20th century. But then we get into the late 1980s, and people are starting to have ethical concerns about the conditions on the chocolate plantations and questioning where their food is coming from. And that is when we see the bean to bar single origin chocolates really take off. And now you can walk into Whole Foods and they have half an aisle of chocolate bars to pick from that are all marketing some sort of different ethical or wellness concern. So I'm hoping tonight you'll have a little more information by the end. So next time you're overwhelmed in the Whole Foods chocolate aisle, you'll be a little more informed. And so I'll pause for a second. If anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself and shout it out. Otherwise, we will move on and there will be more time for questions at the end. All right. So wellness. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, cacao, the unadulterated, unroasted bean, that is, you can buy it, as is, cacao nibs. You've heard these terms before, probably. It's going to be far more rich in nutrients because it is unprocessed. So the basic rule for all foods is the closer it is to its original form, the higher the nutrition value. So cacao is what you're looking for to get the biggest bang for your buck, health and wellness wise. Cocoa, on the other hand, it's roasted. So during that roasting process, it does sort of denature some of the nutrients in there, but there's still lots of nutrients in there. So all chocolate in all of its forms is very rich in iron, zinc, and copper, which are essential for cell and energy production, cellular repair, and really important in creating red blood cells, which is where you get the energy from. Also an excellent source of phosphorus, which is critical to bone health, and magnesium, which is hugely essential in so many metabolic functions. And then the big one that gets everyone really excited are the flavonoids. So flavonoids are defined as a diverse group of plant-based compounds, also called bioflavonoids, or formally vitamin P, recognized for potent antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-carcinogenic properties. Other food sources of flavonoids are citrus fruits, berries, coffee, red wine, tea. They just guard against toxins. They reduce blood pressure. They help with lowering insulin resistance. It's great for heart health. It helps improve cholesterol, reduces clotting risk, reduces arterial stiffness, also increases blood circulation, which can improve brain function, but also can lower the risk of stroke. And then it is clinically proven to boost your mood. But as with everything, always in moderation, because you really need to consider the sugar content of what you're having. Too much of a good thing can ruin the party. And heavy metals have become a hot topic in dark chocolate recently. I feel like there's kind of a smear campaign against dark chocolate for heavy metals. Unfortunately, this is nothing new. Lots of things have heavy metals in them, but a lot of chocolates were measuring really dangerous levels of heavy metals. And that's why it's really important to know where your food is coming from, because these heavy metals are getting into the chocolate right at the source, right at the plant, due to just environmental issues and the conditions in which these plants are grown on the plantations. There's sewage and pollution nearby. Those plants are soaking up those heavy metals right out of the dirt. And then even more heavy metals can be absorbed during the cultivation and processing of the cocoa beans on site. So companies are just getting that chocolate with these heavy metals in it. So you really have to go straight to the source. So you want to look for chocolate bars from companies that at the very least know where their chocolate's coming from. They're not just ordering mass produced leftover garbage. They actually know where it's coming from. So one of the bars we're going to try tonight is a single origin. They're pretty interesting. So we can go into a little bit more detail about single origin when we get to that bar. So I'll pause for questions again. I think I see someone trying. Oh, I see you, Cattery. Let me see if Brooke, can you unmute Cattery?
Okay, I
There
unmuted.
we go.
How would you know whether your chocolate bar has heavy metals in it?
So you won't probably know by the chocolate. A lot of these, so when we get to it, I'll show you on these. But you really have to go to the chocolate's website and see where they're getting their chocolate from. All three of these companies that we're going to go through tonight have a section on their website about where they source their beans and what their commitments are to either environmental concerns, health concerns, ethical concerns. So you really got to do some digging, unfortunately. But typically, a higher quality chocolate is going to come from a single source. When it comes from a single source, they know what's going on there. If they're just buying bulk chocolate, they have no idea where it's coming from, and they really can't guarantee anything.
Mm.
Any other ones? Hard for me to see you guys on here. All right, then we will move on to some tasting notes real quick. So we're going to go through this as we do the tasting, but while we do the tasting, we're just going to talk about the type, the percentage of cocoa in there, the snap, the texture, the melt in your mouth, and then the taste. So let's just start tasting and we can answer more questions along the way. Stop sharing my screen. Get back with you guys. All right. So time to get your chocolate out and your cards. So we're going to do this like a wine tasting. We're going to start with the lightest and move our way to the darkest. So let me get mine here. So before we even open our chocolate, we check out the label. I'll start with the Lake Champlain because this one has a little more information on the label just to show you. So from the label, we know it's a dark chocolate. We know it's 80%. So what does 80% mean? That's the amount of cocoa in it, the cocoa plant, the cacao plant. So this means the cocoa powder and the cocoa butter. So the higher the percentage doesn't mean it's more chocolatey or it's going to be more bitter. It could actually just be a higher cocoa fat content. Um, so that I think that's something that people don't often know. They think it's going to be darker when it's a higher percentage, but that is not necessarily true. Another term in chocolate is inclusions. So if there's something in here, like a Mr. Good bar, the peanuts would be the inclusion. We're not doing any of that tonight. So tonight we're going to start actually eating with the little red heart. So this is from Munson's. I think most of you here tonight are from Connecticut, so you're probably familiar. It's one of my favorite chocolates because I grew up on it. They're a third generation chocolatier out of Bolton, Connecticut, originally started in Manchester. Um, they started, with candy making. So they're not as concerned with like the purity of their plain chocolate. They're candy makers, they're confection makers. So Their chocolate, according to their website, are responsibly sourced from West Africa and Indonesia, but they are buying more of a bulk chocolate. It's not a single origin. Um, but in their mission statement, they are committed to farmer livelihoods, community well-being, and protecting our planet. And they really like to harp on using local dairy. So that's why I thought this would be a fun milk chocolate to try because it's just 100% Connecticut dairy in here. So let's get tasting with this one. So we can open this guy up. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at it. So sometimes you get chocolate and it will have like white on it, if it like melts and then rehardens and it just like doesn't look really pretty. That's called the chocolate bloom. That means it got untempered a little bit and some of the sugar and cocoa butter has leaked out. It's totally fine. It's totally safe to eat. It's just not as pretty looking. And the better a chocolate is tempered, the less likely it is for that to happen. So this is looking pretty good to me. We've got like a pretty good shine to it. The shine is important because if you don't get that shine, it's not going to be as hard. It's going to be like soft and bendy and just, not what you want out of a chocolate bar. So this has passed our visual inspections. Then we want to snap it. It's kind of hard with the heart. I don't know if you could hear that, but it made a pretty good snap. It made a sound. It didn't just quietly rip. And breaking the chocolate open allows us to smell it. So you can give this a smell. And this one is very, very milky. This is a milk chocolate to me. I don't know if anyone has a stronger opinion about it, but I think milk chocolate, the first thing I always smell is the dairy in it. So we smell that and then we taste it. So when you taste it, it's down. I'll taste it with you guys. You want to let it melt in your mouth. Chocolate is supposed to melt at body temperature. And you want to notice, does it have a quick melt, a slow melt? Is it smooth? Is it chalky? Chocolatiers, the goal is a smooth, quick melt. That's the desired goal. So I think this one has a pretty quick melt, but I do think it's a little chalky. There's a little bit of texture in it. You can kind of feel that cocoa powder. Flavors in the milk chocolate. This one just like, I really just taste the dairy in this one. I taste like some caramel flavors. Chocolate tasting is, a lot like wine tasting. There can be fruity notes, nutty notes, citrusy notes. But I think with milk chocolate, the real goal for chocolatiers is the candy part of it, the dairy in it, any inclusions. So does anyone have any questions so far? Any comments? Want to share your opinions on that? Good, we like it. Is there a way to unmute like everybody? Learning Zoom along the way here. All right, so let's move on to, someone said, let's move on to our next one, this rocket chocolate. So this one's really interesting. If you peel this guy open, it has sort of a double wrapper. So if you pull away the paper wrapper from your foil wrapper, this has a ton of information on it. And if you buy their big bars, it's all in the back, so you don't need to like unwrap it in the store. But Rocket Chocolate was started in 2010 by some boys in Bushwick, Ryan and Nate. Ryan had taken a trip to Thailand where he tried raw unfermented chocolate for the first time. And he just thought it was so cool because it was really fruity tasting and completely different than anything he had tried before. So he comes back to Bushwick, him and his friend, they start making chocolate just like in their apartment, experimenting with it. And Rocket Chocolate was born. So they are committed to single origin, unroasted, fermented chocolate. So this chocolate is going to taste how the fruit tastes. This one in particular, it's on here, right in the middle. This is from the Durante province in the Dominican Republic. So that is exactly where their beans are coming from. So this is how you know if you're getting like a quality chocolate is they are willing to tell you right there exactly where they are getting their chocolate from. That kind of transparency is really important.
What does
Like,
unfermented mean? You said it was
or I'm sorry, this is unroasted and fermented and is
oh,
fermented instead.
oh.
My apologies. Um, so it is fermented instead of roasted. You need to somehow cook the bean. It's just, a raw fruit. And you can either roast it. When you roast it, you add heat. When you ferment it, you're not adding as much heat
Oh.
to get it to more that chocolate looking consistency. So the single origin unroasted ones, they're very, very fruity. Um, so let's just go right into this, sort of the same thing. We'll look at this one. This one has a really nice shine to it. Right away, that's a great sign. When we snap it, yeah, that had a really nice snap. So this is like a great chocolate. When I smell it, I smell fruit. I definitely smell like sort of a black currant kind of smell, a dark fruit. A lot of times people smell like a burnt rubber texture, even, or burnt rubber smell, even. Sometimes you can sort of smell a sour lactic acid smell. Lactic acid is a byproduct during the fermentation process, and sometimes you can smell that in here. So let's have a little bite, see how it melts. Mm. This one's a much slower melt, and I think it's very fruity tasting. This is
Mm.
not my favorite kind of chocolate to snack on and eat. Like, I find it interesting, but it's just very fruity. Um, Another thing to note about this is that it is just made with cacao sugar and cacao butter. So none of this is roasted into cocoa. It is just very, very simple ingredients on
Tastes a
that
little
one.
bitter to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Nope. This is definitely better. Roasting it helps get rid of that bitter flavor. Um, so yeah. Any questions on Raka?
I have a few
Emily,
questions, if that's okay.
go for it.
Okay, first question. For smelling it, why do we break it?
So, when it's in the package, the outer layer, kind of like anything else, gets a little bit dried out. And when you break it open, that is like the fresh, untouched by air chocolate, and it's retaining much more of the flavor and smell. So you can smell it unbroken, but you're going to get a way more pungent smell when you break it open.
Okay,
Kind of like when
got
you
it.
swirl wine.
And then the second question is you were saying how chocolate, chocolate tasting is a lot like wine tasting where there's like fruity notes, citrus notes. Do you, is like, so you said that this one was fermented. Do you think it tastes more fruity because of the way that it was cooked, or is there anything that can?
Abs- yeah, absolutely. These guys who made this chocolate, they right on their website, they've got a line, the fruit brings the flavor. So they like to have an unadulterated, unroasted process so that you are tasting, really like the fruit of the cocoa or the cacao, excuse me. Um, it would be kind of the equivalent of different kinds of grapes for wine. Some people are just like, it's just red wine, it's just dark chocolate, but wine drinkers know, like, no, you've got Cabernet, you've got Merlot, you've got all sorts of different types of wine. Um, and that's really where that fruitiness is coming from. It's just that original plant. That
Oh,
smell is
cool.
just shining through.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anybody else? Go for it, Kateri.
Is there a difference in caffeine content between like a milk chocolate and a dark 80%, 60%, 90%?
Absolutely. So yeah, actually something I probably should have mentioned with the milk chocolate is the percent of cocoa. So the cocoa powder is what is going to have the caffeine in it. That's how it's coming from the original plant. Something that's roasted, that's going to roast out some of the caffeine.
Ah,
Um, but you're never going to fully get rid of it. Milk chocolate, by legal definition in the United States, needs to be at least 10% cocoa, but that again can be cocoa butter. So milk chocolate is going to have an incredibly low caffeine content. The more cocoa powder or cacao in the chocolate is going to be the higher caffeine content. But the more it's roasted and the more it's processed is going to get rid of some of that caffeine. Great question. All right, then we will move on to our last one. So this is Lake Champlain chocolate. So fun story about how this chocolatier came to be. So they are out of Burlington, Vermont. It was started in a restaurant called the Ice House um, by Jim Lampman. And he ran this restaurant, and every Christmas he would buy all of his staff these like fancy chocolates. And one year his pastry chef got brave and told him, these chocolates kind of suck. And he was like, oh, really? Well, then can you make something better? And his pastry chef did. And Jim was pretty impressed. So Jim and the pastry chef worked together to create what is now Lake Champlain chocolates. And they are very committed to being all organic, fair trade, and kosher. And almost all of their chocolate comes from the Dominican and a little bit from Guatemala. But if you go onto their website, they will tell you where the chocolate is coming from for the different products. So this one is an 80%. And if you read the ingredients on this one, the ingredients are chocolate liqueur, sugar, cocoa butter, and vanilla. So chocolate liqueur isn't what it sounds like. It is just a mash version of chocolate that's sort of processed on site at the plantations. It is a mixture of cocoa powder and cocoa butter. So it's coming in sort of like a liquidy, gooey form instead of being completely separated and brought back together. It's kind of a little less processed because it's has not been separated into that cocoa powder and cocoa butter and then brought back together. But it also gives you less control over the final product. So like I said, this one's an 80%. It is not a single origin. And this one is roasted. So we open this one. This one has, I think, less of a shine on it. So it's not tempered quite as hard. Let's snap it open. So that one also had a pretty good snap to it. So it is properly tempered. Let's smell. So this one smells more like the kind of chocolate I like to eat. It's you can smell that it's roasted. It doesn't have as much of that fruity flavor, I think, fruity smell to it. I get some notes of coffee, maybe a little caramelly there. Yeah, this one is definitely my favorite. So let's taste. So this one, I think when you taste it, you immediately taste the cocoa. You can feel it on your tongue, the texture. I think this has the most chocolate flavor of the three. I think in the fermented one, you're really tasting cacao. You're tasting the fruit. This one, you're tasting cocoa. You're tasting the chocolate that we're all really used to.
It's good.
So any questions on those guys? No. All right. So now you have tried 3 different chocolates. You have tried a milk chocolate, you have tried a fermented chocolate, and you have tried a roasted dark chocolate. So the dark chocolates are the ones that have, really the nutritional value. A lot of milk chocolates these days, in Europe, milk chocolate usually has closer to 20% cocoa in it. Here, as I said before, the legal definition is 10%. And unfortunately, a lot of chocolates are becoming chocolatey products. They can no longer even call themselves chocolate. So an example is Hershey's Mr. Good Bar. They found a way to make it cheaper, and they replaced the cocoa butter with vegetable oil. So it is no longer considered chocolate. It is a chocolate flavored peanut candy. So those are the kinds of things you got to keep an eye out for with your chocolate is you really got to read the ingredients and you got to know where your food is coming from because they'll be sneaky on you and you want chocolate to stay a health food in your life and not let it get adulterated. Do we have any more questions?
I've tasted some chocolates that are like waxy tasting.
Mm-hmm.
Do they
Yeah,
do
so those probably don't, they probably have a filler in them. They might even have wax in them. A lot of things are made with soy or corn oils.
Oh,
When you don't have that pure cocoa butter is what's going to melt at room temperature. And if they're using another kind of fat in there, or at body temperature, excuse me, and if you have another fat in there that has a higher melting point, it's going to take longer to melt in your mouth, and you're going to have to like kind of chew it, and that's like not as good, in my opinion. I think Jeff, did you have a question? Oh, can't quite hear you. I don't know. Maybe your microphone isn't on.
On the,
Oh, oh wait, now you're muted. We were so close.
now,
Now I can hear you. Perfect.
okay. So down in Florida, in Orlando, there was actually a chocolate museum,
I would love to
and
go to that.
same story you're saying, but they walk you through a bunch of
Clear
different
chocolate factory.
things. Well, not really, but they do show you processing equipment and some of that thing.
Hmm.
And they also have one where they made a bunch of buildings, like the Taj Mahal, out of chocolate.
That's amazing.
So
That is
it was very
amazing.
interesting. And then there was an option where you could do a wine pairing with some of the
Mm.
chocolates.
Hmm.
And we did that, and that was pretty neat. If you like wines, obviously these
Maybe.
are going to be sweeter wines, not a
Hmm.
dry wine, but and they went well. So interesting. If you're ever in Orlando, and if you're a chocoholic like I am,
That's fantastic. I will
yeah,
absolutely have to check that out. Yeah, I would say if you want to pair wine with any of these chocolates we had tonight, I think a nice Cabernet Sauvignon would go well. It's very tannic wine. It has a nice texture to it to help cleanse your palate between bites of chocolate and have every bite be new and refreshing.
yeah.
That's great. Any other questions tonight?
Well, I got a comment. First off, thank you for hosting this.
Oh, our
Um,
pleasure.
and we're in Pennsylvania, so we're one town away from Hershey's. But what we actually like to do is Zimmerman's Nuts and Candy is a local candy shop where they have racks and racks and racks of various chocolates, baker's chocolates. They also have glass cases for the chocolates, and they bring a lot of the regional chocolates down for us to buy. I happen to like the dark chocolate with almonds. That's just my favorite. So thank you for allowing us to. I'll be asking them for some fermented chocolates and some unroasted, and we'll and they'll point me because I always walk by this stuff and they point me where it goes. But thank you for the tasting. Enjoyed it.
That's fantastic. Thank you
Multiple
so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
thank you.
All
Very
right.
good.
Awesome. So, any last questions? Otherwise, we will wrap it up. No? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This was super fun for me to research. I hope you guys had fun tonight doing this. And I hope you guys all get some chocolate on Valentine's Day.
I do too.
Thank
Already
you.
bought.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Ellen.
You.
Have a good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Ellen.
Thank
You
you.
too.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, Ellen.
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome.